Welcome back, everyone. We're excited to dive into our next book, Getting Things Done by David Allen. And again, what we're doing now is going back to the original episode I recorded by myself before Britain joined, and then revisiting the best parts of the episode and kind of pulling what were the key paradigms and principles from that episode to talk about. So before we jump into this, I had somewhat of a unique opportunity and experience of being able to work very closely with David Allen early on in my career. So right out of college, I worked for a company that helped license and franchise training companies all over the world. And one of the companies we partnered with was David Allen's company. It was actually called the David Allen Company, and we basically help take his training content global through franchising and licensing to other training companies, say in Japan, Korea, Australia, where they would get certified in the GTD methodology and then be able to teach that content to companies in their home country. So I actually know David Allen really well personally and his wife, Catherine. They're amazing people. And I'm just blown away and enamored by this book and just the deep insight that it brings. So one thing I'll say, and this is something David Allen always talked about too, he says he would kind of laugh at how GTD was labeled as a productivity or a time management system. And he kind of would laugh and say, can you really manage time? The whole concept of time management is kind of funny. But I thought I would briefly, before we jump into the clips with David, so just to give kind of a brief history and overview of, let's call it time management / productivity in the last 100 years. And again, this is a very, very simplified version, but I just think it's kind of interesting to talk about, and specifically how it relates to paradigm shifting books and the first 3 books that we review. So you think back to the early 1900s, where it was kind of the industrial route. So think in terms of efficiency. Think of like the Model T with Henry Ford, where it was all about speed, productivity, and like this concept of an assembly line. And then around the 1950s, it kind of morphed a little bit with the way people worked, where this concept of personal productivity emerged. So think of calendars, planners, to-do lists, more of like in a business setting. Then in 1989, our grandfather, Stephen R. Covey, wrote The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, where he kind of took the concept of personal productivity and basically said, it was habit 3, put first things first, the idea of importance over urgency. And kind of said, hey, yes, the calendars, the planners, the to-do lists, all that is great. But if you're not focused on what is actually important, what's the whole point? And then 2001, so we're talking 11 years later, David Allen wrote Getting Things Done. And Getting Things Done is all about appropriate engagement and managing the present with clarity and having an external system, trusted system, that you can kind of offload your brain, essentially. And then the kind of the last phase of, let's call it time management productivity, is the 2010s and onward, where you have people like Cal Newport, who wrote Deep Work, Greg McKeown, who wrote Essentialism. Another example is Oliver Burkeman, who wrote 4,000 Weeks. So it's not just about getting things done, but doing the right things in the right way for the right reasons and making space for what matters most. So I just think it's interesting when you look back at the last 100 years, this whole concept of time management, personal productivity, and kind of the different shifts and eras. And I was talking to Britt before we started recording. I would make the argument that the best 3 books, if you were to kind of combine and have like a superpower productivity time management system, I would pull from the 7 Habits. I would pull from Getting Things Done, which we're talking about today, and then I would also pull from Essentialism. So essentially, the first 3 books that we're reviewing as part of paradigm shifting books are those 3. So I think it really is kind of a unique thing to dive into these books, because if you took the best core elements from each of these 3 first books we're reviewing, you would have like the greatest system of all time.
Right.
So anyways, with that, I know it's kind of long. With that, why don't we hop in and let's listen to the first clip from David Allen, where he talks about this concept of appropriate engagement.
Getting things done, the methodology is about being appropriately engaged with your life. Are you appropriately engaged with your cat? Are you appropriately engaged with your boss? Are you appropriately engaged with your career and your future? Are you appropriately engaged with your spouse? Are you appropriately engaged with your dishwasher? Whatever it is that happens to have your attention, the reason it has your attention is you're not yet appropriately engaged with it. That's not a negative thing. That's just a signal. It says, wait a minute, there's something I need to capture and decide about that, organize some reminder about what to do about that, if anything, and put it in the right place that I trust. And I'll see it at the right time. So then dishwasher is off my mind. Cat food is off my mind. Career is off my mind. So it's really about how do I get clear and present about anything? And it may indeed include getting a whole lot of stuff done, because this methodology actually produces the ability to when you say, how do I be successful? Successful at what? Productive at what? You go on a vacation to relax and you don't relax, that's an unproductive vacation. And, productivity, Stephen, as you know, has got a lot of baggage around it called work harder, sweat harder, work more hours, play da-da-da-da. So indeed, it might mean that if those kinds of things show up as the appropriate things you need to do to then clear your mind and to stay focused and present on what you're doing.
So to me, what David Allen just kind of talked about is it's a big paradigm shift. And kind of one of the key concepts of GTD is this idea of appropriate engagement and being appropriately engaged. So GTD is not really necessarily about getting things done, but it's more about clearing a path of being able to be present. So like if your brain is holding unprocessed clutter, you're not fully in the moment. And GTD basically helps you build a system that releases your mind from that clutter. So I used to always think in terms of being productive meant being efficient, cranking things out, getting ahead. But GTD reframed that for me is basically it's about being able to be present with what matters most right now.
I really like that. It's funny. There's a quote that I remember hearing it as a teenager and thinking, well, that is the dumbest quote ever. It's so obvious. But as I've gotten older, I actually really like it, which is, I think a coach used to say to me, which is, wherever you are, be there. And I really like that. I've talked to my wife about this, that one of the types of people that I want to be, I know everyone listening has probably talked to someone where you feel almost like you're wasting their time, or you can sense that they are needing to get to something or that ready for the conversation to end. And I've always wanted to be the opposite of that. But in order to do that, you have to kind of, not have a cluttered mind, not have other things on, and be present. So just that quote, wherever you are, be there. And the type of person I want to be, it comes to mind with that. And there's a lot of parallels with sports, obviously. And I actually think he mentioned sports here in this next clip. So let's take a listen.
Stephen, you're an athletic guy. Got a favorite sports team? You like soccer? You like
Yeah, I like NBA,
whatever.
college football.
Yeah,
soccer.
right.
Yeah.
So think about these guys. When they get onto the field, a soccer player, when they get on the field, what are the 2 things most on their mind once the bell rings, once the ball is out and in play? What are the 2 things on their mind? The major things are on their mind. Number 1, where's the goal? Number 2, where's the next play? Or what's the next play? Right. So outcome and action become a core element. It's true on a basketball field, it's on a football field, it's on a soccer field, it's on anywhere. Excuse me. And by the way, do you think they haven't practiced or trained with any kind of methodology before that game whistle blows? Or do you think they've been practicing lots of different, clarifications of models? Once this goes here, here's how we play, and here's what we do. So it's not over-structuring, but creating a structure that allows you the freedom to just focus on goal and action. So I may have said a mouthful, but that really is something you don't get when you just get a time management book or a training about or whatever. It's a thought process that's built into that, but it's not hard to do. Everybody kind of doing it automatically. It's not like a foreign language or new technology you need to learn. You just need to decide, wait a minute, where are we going? What's the next step? How do I organize reminders of that, put them in the appropriate places? It lets my head be clear so I can cook spaghetti, tuck my kids into bed, just by loving and presence without worrying about the meeting I had and the meeting coming up.
I love this. There's a lot to unpack in that, right? But this idea of building out a structure that helps you do this. First thing I want to reference is just he talks about the preparation of these sports teams, and it is true that preparation frees you to be present, right? When you have prepared enough, and you get into the scenario where all different branches come off, and there's different things that happen, and you have to be more reactive. The preparation really helps you. But he said something really interesting. He said, and I'm quoting, "It's not over-structuring, but it's creating a structure that allows you the freedom to just focus on goal and action." So I think it's interesting. You almost look at structure and freedom as a paradox, but he says they kind of go hand in hand, that you create a structure that allows you the freedom to focus and be present and focus on just goal and action. Something it reminds me of, and for those listening that know football, there's something called a hurry-up offense, which is exactly what it sounds like. Your whole goal is to get the other team to feel like they need to hurry up. So you're going quick, you're going fast, and it is a lot less detailed than just the regular everyday plays. But the whole purpose of it and goal of it is just to get the other team to hurry up. So that is your whole goal, and that's your next action, is just to go quick, line up, and get the other team to panic a little bit. And it's funny because that structure actually allows for a different type of freedom than the very detailed plays that you run. I don't even know if that makes sense listening to it on a podcast, but it just made me think of that structure of hurry-up offense that allows for a freedom. And I think that paradox actually goes hand in hand.
No, it's well said, Britt. I totally get what you're saying. It is deep. Like I've gone back and listened to David, and I've been around David a lot. He is such a smart person that you really have to go back and unpack what he's saying. But there's truth to that. So, all right, let's get into the next clip with David, where he articulates why having GTD as a thought process matters.
So understanding, okay, where do you want to go? What does that mean? What does success mean? What would it look like 5 years from now if you were totally successful career-wise, lifestyle-wise? Describe your scene. So that's part of getting things done is understanding, well, wait a minute, what are the outcomes that we have, that are current and inherent in what we're thinking about and what's got our goat right now? And then what are the action steps I need to take? But those are not, that's a thought process that doesn't show up automatically. You actually have to train yourself to the thought process. So getting things done, and what I came up with, one of the ways we describe that to a lot of our corporate clients is it's an installed thought process. What if you never started a meeting without going, what exactly you were trying to accomplish by what time today? How many people listening or watching this have ever been that, have ever said that, or ever heard that in any meeting you've ever been in? Count them on less than a hand, right?
Right.
And yet, how critical are those questions and the answer to those questions critical in order to have a productive or successful meeting? So we just uncovered the algorithm or the formula about once you've got stuff that has your attention, how do you apply a thought process to it?
It's funny. It actually reminds me, my wife and I always talk about whenever someone explains a board game, I can't listen or pay attention for more than 2 seconds. My mind just, you hate board games, Stephen. You usually leave the room.
That's true. I do.
But we always talk about how when people explain board games, they never start with the end objective. And that's the key. You always have to start with the end objective. They start going into these different rules and stuff. It's just funny. I mean, but like you said, any meeting, anything, any training, you get to a new job. I think about, I've had so many different offenses in the last 7 years. I've probably learned 5 or 6 different offenses, and some coaches installed them poorly and some coaches installed them brilliantly. And the ones that did it brilliantly were so detailed in schedule and they said, okay, on this Monday, we're installing this. And then on this Wednesday, we're installing this. And on this Thursday, we're installing this. And they had a perfect plan of why and exactly what they were going to install and accomplish. Anyway, so I just think of that in terms of install and training.
Yeah, I love the idea of GTD being like a framework or an algorithm, or as David calls it, an installed thought process. So it was really when I first came across this and first started working with David, like it was kind of a light bulb moment for me where you often assume that people know how to think clearly, but GTD shows that clear thinking is actually a discipline that can be learned and trained, even installed. I mean, again, that's why getting things done. Again, it's they do trainings, like corporate trainings for Fortune 500 companies all over the world to basically install this thought process of how to get things done. And the reason why is anyone that's been in corporate America knows that most meetings and most people and goals, there's a lot of fuzzy goals, which leads to a lot of kind of vague or wasted effort. And again, that's why something like a GTD is brought into companies. So question to ask yourself as listeners, if you're listening, is how often do you go into something like, whether it's an email, a project, conversation, a meeting, without clearly asking, what is the outcome and what is the next step? Try going a full day asking those two questions before any major task and see what shows up differently with how your mind operates. So it's kind of simple, and you might say, oh, well, that's common sense. But one of the things our grandpa used to always say is, what is common sense is not always common practice. And I think it's just a powerful thing that you might consider doing.
All right, let's turn to the next clip where David breaks down the 5 steps of what getting things done actually are.
The 5 steps are capture, clarify, organize, reflect, engage. So let me back up. Capture. What's on your mind right now? Anybody listening or watching this right now, if you have a pen and paper close to you or some sort of recording device, just take the next 30 seconds and write down what most has your attention right now. What's most on your mind? That reminds me, we've got to figure out whatever, right? So capture that. The capture step is first, which is what most people's to-do list, if they have a to-do list at all, they kind of look like that. I need cat food. I need to hire a vice president. So capturing all of that. Capture step is just identifying the things that actually have our attention. Second step then is to okay, once you have that big list, what are you going to do with each one of those things? And then you need to go through a very critical and important next process, which you decide, is that reference? Is that trash? Is that something you're actually going to do something about? And if it's the latter, if it is something you're going to do something about, what doing look like? What's the next action on it? And will one action not finish this? Great. If not, then what's the project that you need to keep track of until it's done? So then that's clarifying the outcome and action, embedded stuff in the things that have people's attention. Step 3 is to make sure you've organized some reminders of the project you came up with and the actions that you came up with, and you couldn't finish them in the moment. So that's having some sort of trusted external system, because your brain just sucks as an office. Your brain's a crappy office. About 4 things is all the cognitive scientists have basically proven that you can keep in your mind, and then not just be driven by latest and loudest. Because your brain didn't evolve to do that. It didn't evolve to remember remind. It evolved to do some cool stuff, which is look around your environment, notice things, use long-term history, and then make decisions about, wow, that's a tiger over there, the rain's coming, I need to do whatever. Your brain does that very well. But you go to the store for lemons, you come back with 6 things and no lemons. What happened? You tried to use your brain as an office. It sucks as an office. So the whole idea is to capture stuff, getting out of those head, making appropriate decisions about what to do. Step 3, organizing the results in some trusted place like a calendar or a to-do list or whatever. And then step 4, making sure you look at your calendar, make sure you look at your errands list, make sure you look at your grocery list. So then step 5, when you engage, when you then decide to put your attention or your focus on one particular thing, you've already looked at all the rest and said, that's it. So you're present to do that with full attention and focus. So there's a short version of, as you know, a lifelong craft.
What David broke down: capture, clarify, organize, reflect, and engage. Again, they do like full day trainings on this, 2-day trainings on it, but it's pretty simple. And I sat in a lot of these trainings, so I'm not an expert by any means, but I just want to share kind of my experience with GTD over the years and what I found to be most effective. So one thing that happens to a lot of people when they get into like a GTD is they kind of get enamored with, oh, what apps am I going to use? And I think there's kind of a lot of people that get into GTD sometimes can be kind of nerdy anyways when it comes to like apps they're using. And so that was what happened to me is when I first kind of got into this, I'm like, oh, I'm going to have like the best system in the world. I'm going to have Notion. I'm going to have Evernote. I'm going to have like 4 productivity apps, and my system's going to be amazing. And what I've found over the years is that the more simple it is, the better it is. So the easier and the most simplified you can make it, that is the absolute key. There's not an official sanctioned GTD app. There's tons of productivity apps that can work. And so for me, where I'm at today is I have found that I use Apple Notes as kind of my reference system. I'll use a calendar, like just on an Apple calendar that basically just manages my schedule. And then the one app I do use, it's called Things 3. And again, you don't have to use Things 3. There's a ton of productivity apps out there. But the way that I do it, again, the first step of capture is just to write down what has your attention. So I just have on my phone, I've got a little plus sign that I put on my homepage. I click the plus sign, and then I can offload of, whatever's on my mind, I can offload it and it goes into my Things 3 app. The second step is clarify, which is basically asking the question, is this actionable? And the biggest thing is you basically just need to review that at least once a week is kind of what they say. The third step is to organize, which just means you're putting it in a trusted system. So, and again, for me, that's just Things 3. So I know that, okay, something's on my brain. I write it down and I know it's somewhere that's trusted, and I'll go back to revisit it. So it basically stops the recurring loop in your head. And then the fourth step, reflect, which is basically you are going back at some point during the week, and everything that was on your mind, you just review it and say, when am I going to get this done? Or I can just ignore it. And they recommend doing a weekly review is kind of the big thing to do is you make sure you set a time, just 30 minutes, basically at some point during the week where you just review everything. And then the last step, the fifth step on engage. And this is what I've learned over the years is that time blocking is the key for me. So that when I basically kind of plan my week and say, okay, this is what I need to focus on, that I need to time block and actually put it in the calendar. And it's an appointment I make with myself that's saying, for this hour, I'm going to work on this project. And that helps me do it. So again, I know there's a lot in kind of those 5 steps. I think the biggest thing is just to play around with it and test it. But there is literally so much power in having, again, a trusted external system that you can get things off your mind and stop those loops that go in your head. And again, make it as simple as possible, as simple as it possibly can be, but it really will be a game changer when you set something like this up. So sorry, I talked too long, but I just thought I would share my experience when it comes to GTD.
No, it's great. Like you said, they do 2-day trainings on this. So you might have to, if you're listening, you might have to look some of this up. But I like the idea that, stress comes from not having too much to do, but from breaking the promises to yourself about what you are going to do. So even if they're small and unconscious, so every time you just walk in the house and you say, oh, I should fix the fence, or you say, oh, I need to call my mom, your brain registers that as an open loop. And then eventually you have so many open loops, and GTD helps you close those loops or track them reliably so that your mind can relax, so that you can be present. And speaking of next actions, we want to share this short clip of David where he talks about the importance of next action thinking. This isn't another step of it. It clarifies the impact of having a next action thinking paradigm.
If you haven't figured out the next physical, visible action you need to take about anything, you haven't finished your thinking. So your mind keeps going, what are you going to do about setting the meeting? What are you going to do about the cat food? What are you going to do about that? You got to shut that monkey up. You shut that monkey up by deciding, here's the very, very next thing I need to do. But if you haven't decided whether setting the meeting is sending an email or walking over and talking to somebody, then your brain is not finished yet. And it keeps that open loop spinning in there. So even if you decide to change the next action, well, I thought I was going to send an email, but I think I'll just talk to him when I see him at all. That's fine. But you need to make that decision first. Otherwise, your brain keeps spinning. So I just discovered the next action thinking is what's required in order to stop your brain from spinning about anything. That's simple.
So as David said, it is that simple. But again, this is not another step of GTD. This is just having kind of the mindset or the paradigm of next action thinking. So if you have, let's say, your mom's birthday coming up a few weeks from now, and you say, okay, mom's birthday, you write that on your to-do list, mom's birthday. You kind of change it from saying mom's birthday to, okay, what is the actual physical next action step for mom's birthday? Is it research presents for mom? Like you basically just get down to what is the actual next step. And again, it sounds so obvious, but you'd be shocked when you actually take time to evaluate your life and things like this. And you say, okay, I'm really overwhelmed with all these things. There's so many things on my plate. And then if you have this mindset of saying, okay, there's a lot going on, but what is the next physical action I need to take? Just what is the next action? And then it can really help as far as just clarity and stopping those loops.
Yeah, I think that's the key, is it stops the loops. So you don't have so many. So instead of me, putting planned Disneyland trip on my planner or whatever, GTD forces you to define the very first thing. So I can say, text Leia about dates for Disneyland trip. It just turns from vague into more specific and forward momentum, which is really part of those 5 steps. It's the first part of writing down everything on your mind. And then the second one is, okay, is there an action associated with this? If yes, all right, let's write it down. If no, you kind of forget about it. It's not a loop, so.
Exactly. Okay, last clip from David we're going to share. In the episode that I did with him when it was just me, one question I asked him about, because it's something that I personally have struggled with my whole life, is I asked him about how do you overcome procrastination, because it's something I struggle with. And I really liked the way that David answered this and articulated it. So I thought that we would just share this as our last clip from David.
Smarter and more sophisticated and sensitive you are, the more you'll procrastinate, because the quicker you can create negative phantoms about the possibilities of things being imperfect and the potential consequences thereof. Of course, that's why the people who procrastinate the most sensitive, creative, intelligent people, but for that reason. And the deeper reason would be, well, and this is where you read Stephen Pressel. Yes, Pressel. The thing you'll avoid the most, the thing that will move in closest to your soul. So I should, what if you were successful? What if you actually did that? What if you had that success? Or are you avoiding that? That's a much more subtle and sublime level to think about, if you're willing to do that.
So in essence, what I came away with after talking with him is it flipped my paradigm, changed my paradigm around procrastination. I saw procrastination not as a sign of weakness, but of how much something actually mattered to me. And so procrastination then became more about managing my emotions and not time. And I've read a lot of stuff since then about this, and it seems to be spot on. The other problem that I always have with procrastinating things is picturing kind of the worst case. So picturing doom and gloom. And what David was saying is don't picture that, but picture success and then just focus on the next physical action. So if, is there something you're avoiding? It's usually not because it's trivial. At least, again, anyone that's listening to this podcast is someone that cares and is into personal improvement. And so I feel confident saying that if there is something you've been avoiding, it's not because it's something trivial or dumb, but maybe it's because it matters too much and it's like an emotional thing. So what would it look like with that thing just to take one next action towards that? And I think there's power with that. And since talking with David, I'm not perfect at it yet. I haven't solved my procrastination problem that's plagued me my whole life. But just having that simple reminder of, okay, this is not a sign of weakness. It's because I care about something. There is emotions associated with it. And I just have to remember, what is the next physical action, and break it down to that next action and then just do it. And then all of a sudden you feel some of the relief happen. At least that's for me. So I just wanted to share that because it's been helpful for me.
No, I like that. And as always with these episodes, we like to end both you and I, Stephen, with our paradigm that we take from the book, where we think the biggest idea is, or our paradigm shift personally. And I think for me, it's this idea, with procrastination, he says some of the most creative, smart, caring people are the biggest procrastinators. And just this idea that procrastination does not equal laziness, right? But it's because perhaps the task is so daunting, or we care so much about it that, starting it and stuff, it is scary, and it just feels like too much, almost overwhelming, causes you some anxiety. And so it's this idea of what's the next actionable step, and having that focus from the get-go with whatever that task is, so that it's not as daunting, so that you can start into it and then you kind of get on a roll. So for me, it's that paradigm of what is the next actionable step, and consistently thinking in that framework with things that you need to do. And if there isn't a next actionable step that I can take right now, then that loop doesn't need to be in my mind at that moment, and I can be more present.
Love it. And I would say my key paradigm, I guess there's kind of two that I walk away with GTD. The first is around what David, he says it in the book, and if you hear him speak, he quotes this. He says, your mind is for having ideas, not holding them. So it's that idea of having that external trusted system that you can basically offload all the ideas of all the open loops that you can get it, so that your mind can have more great ideas and creativity. So that's the first one. The second one for me is this concept of redefining productivity to not just being like on a hamster wheel where you're just, I'm going to crank things out more and more and more and just produce, to this concept of productivity being about being able to be present and engaged with whatever you're doing. Those are kind of my big two paradigm shifts. So we hope you've gotten something valuable from this episode today. And we'll look forward to seeing you a week from now when we revisit our next book on grit. Thanks everyone for listening.
Thanks everybody. Appreciate it.